Links to previous episodes are given in the video description, so don't forget to like, subscribe and share the video. The Alpha's Arcane Bride. Episode 5. Dulsanra, how do you speak the truth when everyone has already made up their mind that you are in the wrong? There is no way, because even if I screamed from the bottom of my lungs, my truth would fall upon deaf ears. Just like now, as I was dragged before the elders, no one wanted to listen to a what if I was innocent. Everyone here detested me. I was still wearing the remnants of the dress that Rayan had bought for me, although the entire back was torn. My feet and legs were bare, and I was shivering from the cold as I knelt on the floor before them. My hands were tied behind me tightly, this time using normal shackles. The square that I was standing on was like an ice prison, a form of punishment that refused to let me move from its perimeter. Despite how broken I was, I kept my head high. I will not bow down to anyone. There were 6 of them seated before me around the stone table. High Witch Magdalene, High Witch Eldridge, High Witch Zelda, Elder Samson, Elder Edward. Lastly was High Elder Reginald, who I recognized from his robes. The husband of Eldridge. No wonder she was speaking as an equal to Magdalene last night. Her husband was the head of England's coven. It's been a long time, Reginald said coldly, as he rose from his seat. High Witch Zelda, without wasting more time, let's start by stating the evil doings of the accused. Evil doings? Well, I guess I have done evil. Dulsanra Diana Silver, the cursed daughter of darkness, has a high list of crimes. If I must say so, let us start from the top. Zelda said, casting me a scornful look. At the age of 13 she stole a vast amount of money from her father and ran away from home, knowing full well how dangerous her powers were, yet she didn't care about the dangers in this and still ran away. At the age of 14, she fell into practicing forbidden magic in the forms of necromancy and black magic. Spells taken from the Book of Darkness. She then went on to assist Endora, an evil witch who always defied the laws of magic and the coven. Working alongside her as an all that's not true. I cried out. Silence! Reginald thundered, and I felt the temperature of the prison around me drop. So, this was the plan? Every time I spoke, they'd make it colder. Was I really the evil one here? Didn't the accused even have a chance to speak? As I was saying, working alongside Endora as an ally. Thanks to you, the werewolf's hatred towards the witches has only grown. Zelda continued. You helped Endora attain access to some of the worst forms of magic, even contacting dark witches of the past. The blood of many innocent lives is on your hands. Now that we have heard the accusations, High Witch Magdalene, probe her mind and let's see the truth. Reginald ordered, not even looking at me. I looked at each one of them. Would they extract only what they wanted or actually see the truth? I didn't resist as Magdalena stood up and chanted the spell. She was the strongest of the 3 high witches and probably the one who hates me the least from what I could tell. I just hope she was fair. A searing pain lashed through me and I was once again reliving that night I was sold, but unlike the memory that was now pushed to the farthest depth of my mind. The one that had been planted was at the forefront, it played in the room as if I was living the memory. It went on to me practicing necromancy, me killing the warden, me resurrecting that thing that was meant to be his wife. Endora. giving her the means to strengthen the Wendigos and Manangals. Me contacting the witches of the past, the dark magic that I helped Andorra attain, but to my relief they could also see the conditions I lived in, the way Andorra pushed me to my limits. The way I had been abused, the painful memories flashed before my eyes. Please realize I didn't want to do it. I didn't realize when I started crying, the pain of those memories as she pushed me to the brink of death to achieve the answers she wanted. I watched as I refused to answer her, only for her to torture me with a beating. The werewolves who were told to whip me, beating me relentlessly, or the spells she used to punish me. My screams shrill in the quiet room, the blood-curdling anguish in my cries that no one heard or cared for. The memories became too much, my chest tightening painfully. Her verbal and physical abuse was screaming in my head, my escape. Me telling Rayan the time of her attack, me jumping to my death. Waking up, the werewolf attack, being taken prisoner again. My heart was thumping. Stop, please stop. I didn't realize I was screaming out loud. Enough. Everything suddenly was gone and all I could hear was my heart thumping in my ears, my sobs choking in my throat. I looked up through my tears to see who had spoken. Elder Edward was standing there, his face pale, his lips pressed together. What is it? Eldridge asked. She has suffered, it is a crime to make her relieve that too. He said curtly, and for the first time since I had entered this room, I saw a ray of hope. Elder Edward, you are siding with this thing? Zelda asked. I am not siding with anyone, but let's look at the bigger picture. What made her run away? We all know what we need. But we must also remember that she was not taught how to control her abilities. If we had given her the correct training from the start, perhaps she would never have resorted to this. He stated. The temperature was rising in my small square and I was beginning to shiver from the cold. My breath was coming out frosty. Who was controlling it? I looked at the three women, but all six were talking amongst themselves, and I could no longer hear them. One of them must have cast a spell. I simply lay there thinking they had only seen parts of my life. If after this they still think I didn't deserve any compassion, then they truly were all monsters. I looked at Edward. He was an elder man in his 60s. I hadn't really seen him much back in Salem, only in passing once or twice. He was said to be very wise. It seemed he was my only hope. Magdalene seemed to be wavering. Samson looked pale. Was he worried they'd probe into the truth of how he and his family treated me? The cold was biting into me, and it was hurting my head. Just as I was about to black out from the biting cold, it was suddenly gone, and I gasped for air. The decision has been made, Reginald said, his face now emotionless. He approached me and I flinched, but to my surprise, he simply patted my head. You have committed crimes, and you will answer for them. Yet we cannot overlook the fact that you have suffered more so. We have decided that you have in a way paid for the crimes you participated in. It is time to have a fresh start here with us, Dulcinra Silver, time to show us that you are more than darkness. Prove to us that you are one of us and not what you were born to be. I couldn't comprehend it, his words, his statement. Was this true? After all these years of living in fear, were they truly going to allow me to live my life? It didn't feel possible. How? No, there was more to it. Perhaps I was too suspicious, but I learned early in life, everyone had their own hidden intentions. Of course, we cannot unseal all your powers as of yet, until you have proven yourself. Andorra has used a powerful spell, one that we will need to figure out how to lift. Magdalene said quietly. But you will learn to control your powers, I myself will help you. This is your chance to show us that you are more than what you have become. I lowered my head in a small nod before looking at my father. He was emotionless, yet I didn't miss the fire of hatred within his eyes that he masked quickly. I replied yes, High Witch Magdalene. Quietly. So this was it, my new life? Would they really honor their words? Was this what I wanted? Wasn't it my dream to just be treated as an equal? Yes, once upon a time, I would have jumped with happiness. But now, there was another life that I wanted, with someone else. One I don't think I'd ever be able to have. Rayana truly was smart, she had found 2 spells to help me. First, she had been able to conceal me completely. The spell would keep me hidden unless I wanted someone to see me. My heartbeat, my scent, my presence was all masked. However, we all knew that if there were detection spells, there was a chance I could be discovered, but it was a risk I was going to take. The spells would last around 24 hours. I would need to get to Dulsanra before then, and I would. There was no way I was going to fail her. I just hoped she was okay. The trees cleared up and there it was, the large castle of the Coven Elders. That was her second spell, a locator on Dulsanra. Luckily, we had been able to find a hair of hers from her hairbrush and that was what she had used in the spell. Luckily again, Dulsanra had the crystals we needed for the spell. Rayana and Chris still had tension between them, but I didn't miss how Rayana was quieter. I hoped she took my words into account. I didn't get to talk to Chris properly, but I had thanked them both and told them to head home before anyone found out they were missing. I had brought one of the grimoires with me. One that Rayana said seemed to have the most useful spells that could help us. One I would give to Dulsanra. I was going to find her and get her out of there. I'm coming, my fiery snowflake. Hold out for me. The tracking spell had led me straight to a mansion that sat amongst the trees, and to my relief, her scent lingered. I was following it along the side of the house silently when the sound of voices had made me stop dead in my tracks, hoping no one heard or sensed me already. Night had fallen and it was past midnight. When did these people sleep? Is smart to decide that. A man was saying. But to bring her here. Samson, how do you think I feel with that scum living here? A woman's voice riddled with jealousy could be heard. They were talking quietly, no human or witch would have been able to hear it. Reginald has a plan. We just need to win her over. Elena, she is just a pawn in this. Don't push her too far, we need her. A man's cold voice came. Fine, but I don't want her here for long. The woman complained before I heard footsteps and a door banging. I frowned as I carried on, following the faint scent that was now growing stronger. My heart was thudding, and my wolf was going crazy too. She was close. I saw an open window and made my way toward it quietly. The wind was blowing viciously, and although we didn't feel the cold much, it was below 0 degrees tonight. The windows were icy and my breath appeared in puffs of white clouds in the air. I slipped inside, staying as silent as ever, putting my backpack back on as I slowly walked through the room. I opened the door quietly, pausing to listen or see if I could sense anyone nearby. The coast was clear, so I crept out of the room, closing the door behind me. I hate her. The same woman I had heard moments earlier was speaking to someone, making me stop. Although no one could see me, I could see myself. It felt odd and was unnerving knowing others wouldn't be able to. Her next words made my anger flare. I just wish she'd die. It seems someone above just wants to trouble me by sending her back here. Yes, Mom, I know, but relax. We might be lucky and she'll die from pneumonia. There's no heating on the second floor anyway. I recognized that voice. It belonged to her so-called sister. My anger was raging and the urge to rip them apart was threatening to overcome me, but I fought to keep my aura subdued. Even if I was under a cloaking spell, I had to be careful. I will get revenge on all those who have hurt her, but for now, I needed to reach her. The second floor, which meant she was at least given a bedroom, even if it was without heating. I had been worried she was in a prison cell or something. I silently made my way upstairs, making sure the floor didn't creak under my feet, and followed her scent. It was clear no one else stayed on this floor. The hall was cast in darkness and it was indeed colder compared to the lower sections of the house. The entire house was morbid and dark. Despite the size, it was nothing like the luxurious mansion I had grown up in. The walls were stone with a few tapestries upon them. The lower ground floor was paved with stone, yet the stairs were carpeted and the upstairs halls were wood. The doors to the rooms were thick, solid oak, and I didn't miss the many runes carved into the walls. I wondered for a moment what their uses were, but I guess in the same way werewolves have their own lifestyle, magic was a part of a witch's daily life too. I could smell them. There were 7 other scents in the house besides my kitten's, but I was only able to focus on hers. My heart raced with every step I took. I didn't care what we had to face, I was not leaving here without her. Dulsanra, so, here you go. The young man said hesitantly. Ames, my half-brother. He was 15 now. He had grown a lot and now towered above me. He didn't know how to react upon seeing me, and I wondered if he hated me just as much as the rest of this family did. Thank you, Ames. I said quietly. I had been bandaged up and sent to Samson's house. I didn't consider him family, and I didn't trust him, but something told me he would obey the council, or I hoped so at least. But Amaria was here too, and probably Dawson. Just the thought of those two made my stomach churn. Ames gave a small nod as he looked down at me. I'm glad you came home. I wish you had never run away. All this could have been avoided. He whispered. My heart skipped a beat. What did he mean? He had been there. He saw what happened. I suddenly felt cold, so they had spelled him too. I didn't run. I said quietly, but the truth was so far away in my head that I was beginning to forget what actually happened. The false memory that had been placed at the forefront of my mind was taking over, and it almost felt real. Almost. He ignored my remark, moved his head towards the room. Mother made sure you have clothes and essentials. He said, opening the door to the bedroom that was supposedly meant to be mine. It was weird to be given a room here when I used to sleep on the floor in the bathroom at the end of the house before I was sold. What was the purpose of these fake acts of kindness? I remember going to that bathroom after a long day. Sometimes it would stink of urine and I would find my thin blanket soiled. Courtesy of Amaria, who used to make the dog annoyed on my blanket. On days like those, I had to wash it, leaving me with nothing to protect myself from the bitter cold. The suffocating feeling of being trapped consumed me. I just wanted to leave this place. I wanted Rayan. His gorgeous grey eyes, the way he looked at me. I sighed softly. At least he was safe, wherever he was. I wondered how soon he'd forget me. I had been a piece to him, but what was the point of regretting that now? If I had been kinder, perhaps, he'd have gotten more attached. It was better this way. Hopefully, he returned home and was safe. I said quietly to the boy I know, thank you. I longer recognized. He nodded before I closed the door and looked at the room before me. I didn't trust this nor them. Could I perhaps request the council to move me to a new location? I wasn't sure, but I could try. I placed the bag that they had given me, with some bandages and ointment in it, down on the bed. The room itself was simple. A double bed stood against the wall in the center of the room. A pair of large windows looked out onto the vast forest spread behind the mansion. I walked over to it and looked out. There was no way I'd be able to escape from here. We were on the second floor as well. There was a wardrobe, a chest of drawers, and a small table by the bed. That was the only furniture in the room. The single bulb that hung in the center of the ceiling was bare of any light shade, and the curtains in the window were plain and dark. A second door led off to the bathroom. I knew this room as I had cleaned this entire house as a child. A house big enough to house many, yet it had never had any place for me. And no matter what they gave to me or tried to give, I would never accept this place as my home. I walked to the wardrobe, pulled it open, and looked at the clothes. I could tell they were old clothes of Amaria's. Her style hadn't changed much. They smelled musty and I wondered where they had been stored. I guess I'd need to wash them first. I looked down at the simple black dress that was given to me at the castle. But my bandages had leaked through. Apparently, I wasn't allowed to be healed by a healer, which because this would be my redemption for my crimes. I scoffed. You all. I hated how everyone treated me like a pawn in their games. I wasn't stupid. The coven surely had a purpose for me, I just didn't know what it was yet. I took a deep breath. I won't break. I have fought all my life, and I'll still keep my head high. I guess I better air something before I wore it. I took a few items out, shaking them slowly, wincing at the pain that jarred through my back. My stomach sank as I looked at the items. Everything was rather revealing, and several were backless. On top of that, they were all summer clothing. There was nothing for this weather. They had chosen these on purpose, it was no coincidence. Which meant the mother-daughter duo would find some sad amusement in seeing my scars. Probably to laugh at how ugly I was. Petty. You are not ugly. Scars do not make you ugly. You're still the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Rayan's words floated into my head, and I smiled slightly. He really was delusional, sweet, and perfect, but still crazy to consider me beautiful. There was nothing I could have ever given him. I had nothing, I was nothing. He was an alpha, a strong one at that, and a prince in his own right, someone who deserved every happiness in this world. He had a heart of gold and deserved the best in all aspects of life. I pushed the thoughts that threatened to cripple me away. I needed to stay strong. I looked through the dresser and took out a linen shirt and matching trousers to wear. It was going to be a cold night. There was nothing in there that was suitable for this temperature, but beggars can't be choosers. I had just finished patting my back dry after showering. I needed to apply some ointment, but I felt too weak. I gingerly slipped the linen cami on, about to sit down on the bed, when the door opened to reveal Elena. She stood there looking at me with utter resentment in her eyes. She hadn't changed much over the years. She had gained a little weight and had a little more grey hair than before. "Well, you're back. Don't think that just because we have given you a room that you will be treated like a queen. Today is your only day of rest. I want you up at dawn. The High Elder and his family are coming for dinner tomorrow, and there are things that need to be done. You will cook and you will clean. You need to earn your keep and pay for everything you have done, along with the stress and trauma you have inflicted upon this family." She spat. "Okay. I knew things wouldn't change." Samson had power now, and with Amaria and Elena by his side, both of whom were far stronger than I was if they wanted to treat me like dirt and keep my mouth sealed, they had the power to do so. "Remember that," she hissed. I looked at her sharply but said nothing. I hadn't forgotten the oath I had made to myself when I left this place. I would never forget what this family put me through. I wasn't the 13-year-old girl who had left this place. I was a woman who had been through enough crap, an entire lifetime's worth, and survived it. I was not going to sit back and take from anyone. What was the worst that could happen? I could be killed. But I wasn't afraid of death. In fact, I'd embrace it with happiness. "You are useless, worse than trash. I don't understand why you aren't dead," she hissed, glaring at me. Her already eyes burned into mine, but I refused to look away. I was still tired and weak from the beating yesterday, but I wouldn't show it. Our eyes locked for a good minute. Her powers surged, but I held her gaze until she cursed under her breath and slammed the door shut. I sighed, gritting my teeth as I dropped onto the bed, tired. It was late afternoon, and I hadn't eaten anything since before we went to the diner yesterday. I guess I won't be getting anything tonight either. This place was not home, it never was, and it never will be. Home was. My heart skipped a beat as I realized what had come to mind. Home was where you were. I understand what you meant that night. I wish I could tell you that. I never thought I'd ever think this, but I miss you. I reached the room where her scent was strongest and slowly tried the door handle. It was unlocked, so I slipped inside. The room was dark, save for a sliver of moonlight, and my heart thundered when I saw her lying on the bed. Her chest rose and fell with each breath she took. I felt relief wash over me, but I suddenly felt all my energy drain from me too. I hadn't slept because I had been so worried, but I hadn't even noticed how tired I was until I saw her before me. That fear that had been crippling me eased and I felt lighter. She was safe. Thank Goddess. I shut the door even though I just wanted to run to her. I was glad to see the key in the lock and quickly locked it, wincing at the scraping sound it made. Dulsanra stirred slightly as she turned onto her side. I walked over to her, taking my backpack off and placing it on the ground slowly. Suddenly, her eyes flew open, and she jolted upright, scanning the room. Had she sensed me? Closing my eyes, I remembered what Rayan had told me. I had to think of what I wanted, and just as I had practiced in front of them, I revealed myself to her. Her eyes widened as she looked at me. Her heart was thundering loudly, her breath hitched, and to my surprise, her eyes filled with tears. The surge of emotions that consumed me pulled painfully at my chest. She looked heartbroken and sad, yet there was a whisper of happiness in her eyes. A dream, she murmured, looking at me with such pain in her eyes that I couldn't bring myself to speak. Instead, I dropped to my knees next to the bed. I shook my head, gathering my thoughts as I reached over and cupped her face, making her gasp. Sparks coursed through me from our touch. I stared into her eyes, illuminated only by the moon that shone through the gap in the curtain. I'm no dream, kitten. I whispered, taking in her beautiful face, committing every inch of it to memory. I never wanted to be away from her ever. Only now, as I knelt here, did I realize how scared I was. The fear that I might have lost her, that she may have been killed. The relief that was flooding me did little to hide the emotions that had been drowning me for the last day. And I'm never letting you go again, I vowed. Her chest heaved as she gripped my wrist. My heart skipped a beat when she nodded in agreement. She tugged my hands away from her face, but before I could even feel hurt at the rejection of her action, she wrapped her arms around my neck tightly, throwing her weight onto me, sending me tumbling backwards. She didn't weigh much, but I hadn't been anticipating this. My heart soared and my wolf howled in happiness. My mate, my kitten, was hugging me. I smiled softly, wrapping my arms around her tightly, burying my head in her neck and drinking up her scent as if it was my lifeline. But she was everything I needed. I cupped the back of her head with one hand, holding her against me. Our hearts were racing. She shifted slightly and straddled my lap. I support her back, tensing when I realized she was injured. I was about to move back, but she refused to let me go. I'm fine, she whispered. Her lips brushed my ear, making me clench my teeth. The move sent a rivet of pleasure through me. What had they put her through? And more than that, was this real? Was she really in my lap, hugging me? I didn't know what had brought on this change, but I was going to cherish it. Neither of us spoke as we simply held each other close. Her fingers ran through my hair. Her lips pressed against my head for a moment before she moved back, looking down at me, her fingers grazing the back of my neck. Her heart thundering as our eyes met, she bit down on her bottom lip, making my gaze dip to them. My eyes flashed. I needed her. I swallowed hard, very aware of her straddling me. Her eyes flickered to my lips, and I couldn't stop the smile from crossing them. Oh, she wanted me too. If you want to kiss me, kitten, go ahead, I whispered huskily. My hand twisting into her hair made her gasp, yet I didn't miss the look in her eyes. She wanted me, my mate wanted me. Dulsanra, I wanted him. Our faces were inches apart. His warm minty breath fanned my face, his intoxicating scent filled my senses, and his chest pressed against mine as I sat here, straddling him. Our bodies molded so well together, despite the difference in size. The carnal hunger that burned in his eyes didn't scare me now. His words made my eyes meet his blazing green ones, and for the first time in my life, I decided to believe in him. That smirk of his was my undoing. I flung my arms around his neck, closing the gap between us, as our lips crashed against the others in a sizzling kiss. Sparks flew as our lips touched. Pleasure washed over me and I sighed softly. My entire body was reacting to it. I had never experienced such a delicious feeling. Desire, pleasure, and need were running through me. That ache that he often awoke within me was throbbing once again, blazing to life inside me. His hand tightened in my hair as he controlled the kiss possessively. There was something different about him, like this. He was becoming hungrier as he consumed me. It only made my core clench tighter. I tried to keep up, pressing my body against him, my hand on his chest, very aware of the muscles of his delicious body. The other hand was around his neck. He ran his tongue along my lips, before he plunged his tongue into my mouth. Our lips moved yet hungrily against the others. This would never be enough. One taste of him was enough to have me hooked for life. He didn't stop as he kissed me in the corner of my neck. How was it possible that he knew that spot? I didn't even know. I gasped when his hand squeezed me at the same time he sucked hard on my neck. A flash of a memory from long ago reared its head, and my heart squeezed painfully. Please not now. Rayan. I whispered, my heart thudding as I realized what we were doing, settling in with a reality check. He paused, moving back and searching my eyes. I'm sorry. I blurted out, a flash of confusion and hurt appeared in them, as he slowly let go of my hair. No. I'm sorry. I got carried away. What? Oh hell, he misunderstood. No. I mean, I'm sorry for everything. Well, not everything, not the kiss, I was babbling. He seemed to realize I was okay and that smirk returned. He leant back, bracing his weight on his hands as he looked at me, waiting for an explanation. I took a deep breath and looked down. Oh God, wrong place to look. Eyes up here, kitten. He mocked. I frowned, glaring at him. This little wait, I was meant to be apologizing. I'm sorry for disrespecting you. For all the insults I hurled at you. I wanted to see you angry, to prove to myself that I was right, that you were just like other werewolves, but I was wrong. I whispered seriously, my frown fading away. I like you, Rayan. I realized that there was no way I'd ever be able to forget him. Yes, it was selfish of me to hold him back from finding someone better. But can't I be selfish? If this god before me claimed he wanted me, then I was going to cherish every moment. Maybe one day he will get bored of me, but for now, I would live in the moment and make the most of it, until the day he casts me aside. My smile only grew as she said those words. Goddess was my kitten cute. I pulled her close, claiming her lips in a deep once more. I like you too, kitten. I whispered, breaking away. More than like, but I don't want to scare you off. We kissed for a few moments before I stood up, holding her. I kissed her shoulder softly and placed her in the bed. As much as I want to kiss you all night, you're injured, and you look pale. I said, kneeling between her legs. I hadn't missed the way she had tensed, and I knew there was a high chance it was an old memory. I needed to take it slow, but I also needed to find out what actions could trigger those memories. I won't deny that I was scared to know what she had remembered. Had she been abused? The thought made me sick to my stomach. I just wanted to shield her from the world and kill him who had hurt her in the most painful way. But I just hoped I was wrong. I pushed the thoughts away. I hoped one day soon she would trust me enough to tell me everything so I could help her heal. Her lips trembled, and I didn't miss the way she glanced at my lips. It seems like she liked that kiss. She wasn't the only one. I leaned in, my lips grazing the tip of her ear. Turn around and let me see your back. I whispered, making her shiver. She pulled away and hesitated. I don't think that's needed. I'll be fine, she said, looking uncomfortable. I knew she wasn't bothered about being in front of me. She had stripped off her top once in front of me, which meant she didn't want me to see her injuries. How bad was it? Turn around, Dulsanra, I said firmly. She sighed and turned around, sitting cross-legged on the bed. She reached for the hem of her flowing top, but she seemed to struggle. I reached over, slipping her top over her head and tossing it onto the bed, although I was behind her. But my attention was captured by the horror before me. The gashes made by a whip left not even an inch of her back free. My anger was rolling off me in waves, the urge to shift and go on a rampage was taking over. She turned, concern and panic in her eyes. Control your aura, she whispered. I blinked, reining in my anger. It's okay, Rayan, she murmured. The view before me made my mind go blank, her sitting on the bed on her knees, those sore lips teasing me. Sure, I said, taking a breath when she turned away once again. I didn't miss the tiny smile on her face. It seemed like my kitten was beginning to realize just what an effect she had on me. The list of all those who would pay for their crimes against her was ever growing. I leant down, running my tongue along the worst of her cuts, only for her to gasp and spring across the bed. What are you doing? She yelped, her cheeks burning bright pink. If those injuries weren't so bad, I would have teased her, but the state of her back was suffocating me with crippling guilt and anger. Alpha saliva heals kitten, I said softly. It will help you heal faster, lie down. She looked suspicious at first. How? An ability we alphas have. I shrugged. No one ever questioned that. So you randomly go licking people when they're hurt? She asked, wrinkling her nose. I smirked, glad her sassy nature wasn't gone. No, I haven't randomly. You're my mate Dulsanra, I am not going to leave you like this. Okay, this entire thing does sound weird and animalistic. I couldn't really blame her for calling me a dog. That's weird. I swear, if I don't feel any better by tomorrow and I discover you're lying. I smirked slightly, as she lay down slowly on her stomach after leaving her thread hanging. I realized the move itself was intimate enough. I tried to ignore her. Focusing on her back, slowly licking the wounds, not missing how she tensed, the way her breath hitched. Biting back my own groan when her arousal hit me. I placed a few tender kisses along the way as I licked the wounds softly, hoping it helped. "Do you have anything we can use as a bandage?" I whispered, kissing her shoulder once I was done. "In that bag," she murmured, pointing to a bag that sat on the bedside table as she sat up. Her cheeks were tinged pink. I got off the bed, grabbed the bag, and took the bandage out. "Arms up, kitten," I murmured. She obeyed, turning away, and I began wrapping the bandage around her tightly. Her wounds should be healed considerably by tomorrow. Although I knew she wouldn't heal as fast as a werewolf, she would still heal faster than normal. Once her torso was wrapped in the gauze, I wrapped it around her shoulders and tied it firmly. "All done." She turned towards me, taking hold of my chin and kissing my lips softly, surprising me. "Thank you," she said. I smirked, pulling her into my arms and holding her tightly. Before lifting her up and getting into bed, I pulled the blanket that smelt rather dusty over her slender shoulders. She was cold to the touch too. She tensed as I settled her against me and I loosened my grip. If she wanted to pull away, I wanted her to know she would be able to. After a moment, she relaxed, resting her head against my chest despite her racing heart. "As much as I just want to hold you and let you sleep, I need to know what happened. We need a plan." She nodded. Her eyes were filled with curiosity as she looked at me. "And how did you get in here? You've got magic around you." "Well, it seems you aren't the only witch in my life," I said softly, brushing her hair off her face. "It's a long story. I have all night," she whispered, biting her lip. "Well then, allow me to go first," I murmured, my hand stroking her, pressing her into me. I took a deep breath as I began to explain everything that had happened, about Rayan, about the grimoires. It was difficult to speak of Endora, and the unspoken truth was that it was my grandmother who had tortured her. I knew at some point we would need to address it, but it was not the time right now. After I was done, she told me what happened, about what the elders said, and I couldn't help but agree that there was more to it. They were up to something, but what? I wasn't sure. "So, what now?" she asked when she finished telling me how she was told to wake up early to cook. "We need to see if your powers can be unlocked. That spell Endora used, isn't there a chance it could be in the grimoires we have in our possession?" She shook her head. "She burned the spell in front of me. It was part of a grimoire, but she told me she wasn't stupid enough to leave it lying around, so she had been careful, with that after we were out of here. As for getting out, I had a few ideas." I sat up, placing my thumb to my lips. "This is what we are going to do." It was morning, and I still had plenty of hours left before Rayan's spell wore off, so I would make the most of it and see if I could get any information from the coven itself. Dulsanra had told me that she would be okay without me and that she actually felt a lot better. I could tell she wasn't lying, thanks to some color returning to her face. "Promise me you'll eat something," I whispered, gripping her waist as she tried to leave the room. Her heart was racing as she looked up at me. "And what about you?" she asked, slowly wrapping her arms around my neck. I still couldn't believe my mate was accepting me. "I'll eat you later," I winked suggestively. She pulled away, her cheeks tinged pink as she turned, grabbing the key in the door. I took her elbow, spinning her around. "Hey! Only if you want me to," I whispered with a smirk. Excuse me. Make sure you're careful," she muttered, not meeting my eyes. Even this morning, when I had kissed her, she had been super embarrassed. I think with a fresh mind, she seemed to have realized what she had done last night. I stepped out and she locked the door behind us, pocketing the key. "Don't put silly ideas in your head," she muttered with a frown before she walked off. "Oh, kitten. You really will beg me to eat you out soon enough," I licked my lips, my eyes fixed on her as she walked away. My own trousers felt painfully tight right now. Dulsanra, I hadn't been able to focus on anything properly since morning. I had awoken wrapped up in his arms and the realization of what happened last night had hit me like a freight train. I had been tired, weak, and in pain. In that state, I had told him I liked him. It wasn't a lie, but the fact that I admitted to it terrified me. I also knew, despite my own doubts, that Rayan cared for me deeply. His coming here was proof enough. He was risking his life being here. I should have told him to leave and how I didn't want him here, but I had been too weak to resist and had given in to whatever I felt inside. It had been selfish of me. If he gets hurt it would be my fault. But I also know he is stubborn and there is nothing I can do to control him. So, I just needed to make sure he didn't get hurt. I didn't mind getting hurt, but when it came to Rayan, I wouldn't let anything happen to him. I got to work quickly, in the same kitchen I used to labor in years ago. Although there were some changes, it was still pretty much the same. The horrible memories returned to me and being here was anything but pleasant. The list of dishes to cook was long, and I wondered what the special occasion was for them to be preparing so many. It was surely something important, or they just wanted to burden me, which wouldn't surprise me. I sighed as I looked at the final recipe. I wasn't even sure if this dish was correct. I hadn't really cooked such fancy dishes in my life. For most of the day, no one bothered me, and I managed to eat too. Occasionally, Amaria or Ilana would come in to annoy me in passing, but that was it. I was glad Dawson wasn't around. I hated him the most. By 4 p.m., I was almost done. I was exhausted. I hoped I could go and rest soon. My back was still aching, despite feeling a lot better since Rayan had done his little trick. The memory of his tongue running up my back sent a shiver of pleasure through me. I wouldn't mind him running his tongue over a lot more than my back. My cheeks burned, and I felt mortified at my own thoughts. Focus, Del. Well, look who we have here. My smile fell and I felt my stomach twist. That voice. I remained silent as his heavy footsteps came towards me. I picked up the knife I had used to slice the vegetables and turned to look at none other than Dawson. He hadn't changed much, but the wicked gleam in his eyes seemed to be even more noticeable, or was it just as an adult that I noticed it more? "My, you have grown!" he leered. I felt disgusted as his eyes trailed over me. Had he always looked at me like that? Yes, he insinuated he was waiting for me to grow a little bit. His passing touches and remarks had repulsed me, but this was disgusting. Yeah, I'm no longer that scared child. I've been through hell and more, and unless you want to experience that too. My voice was ice cold and his face faltered. A flash of irritation crossed his eyes, but it was instantly replaced by anger. Watch who you are talking to, he muttered, closing the gap between us. I raised the knife, my anger surging through me. I told you. I am not that child. I hissed. He was about to reply when we heard a commotion in the hallway. This isn't over, he said, looking me over once before he swiftly left the kitchen. I took a deep breath, feeling exhausted as if I had run a marathon. My heart was racing and I realized that, despite how brave I was acting, that scared little girl was somewhere inside me. I picked up a glass, filling it with water and gulping it down when I heard footsteps. I quickly placed the glass down and busied myself clearing the counters. I don't think it is fine. Amaria's voice came. Father, stop. I am your father, Amaria. Show some respect. Samson growled. What happened and why were they coming this way? But why does she have to be there? Amaria shrieked just as the kitchen door slammed open, making me turn around. The look of scorching resentment in her eyes made my heart skip a beat. Although I wasn't as scared of her as I once used to be, the fear was embedded deep in me. I was having to remind myself that she could do nothing. Right? Samson stood there, a frown on his face as he held a large box in his hands. Elder Reginald wants you to be part of the dinner tonight. High Witch Eldridge has sent this for you. Along with the healer. His voice was riddled with confusion, and I felt just as confused. Yesterday they said these injuries would be my punishment, and today they were asking me to join them for dinner. Something was off and it went down to me wondering why they had been so desperate to find me. Don't just stand there. Take it. Samson spat, trying to contain his anger. I walked over to him and took the box, not bothering to even look at him. I will not bow down to these people any longer. The healer is waiting in the drawing room. I nodded and left the kitchen carrying the large box. It was straining my back and by the time I reached the sitting room, I was relieved. I placed the box on the table as I looked at the woman before me. I hadn't seen her before. She was young for a healer. Healer witches were rare and few. This one was no older than 30. She smiled gently at me and motioned for me to come over. She looked faintly familiar, but I couldn't place her from anywhere. Come in, Miss Silver. Dulsanra is fine. I replied, shutting the door behind me. She nodded as she motioned for me to take a seat. I will need to see your back. She gave me a small smile. I nodded, slowly removing the shirt I was wearing. She moved forward, assisting me. We are so happy to have you back in the coven, she said warmly, and I resisted a frown. Why? Why would you be happy to have me here? Some consider me an omen, I said lightly. She didn't reply as she slowly began undoing the bandage. Everyone knows how important you are, she remarked, not answering the question properly. I was missing something, I just didn't know what. Your back has healed surprisingly well, considering these injuries were only made yesterday, they look like they are a few days old. Thanks to Rayan. She began to take out some herbal jars, and slowly applied them to my back. At times, they stung the open wounds. After a few minutes, she placed the final jar down and stood back, whispering a spell before placing her hands on my back. This might feel a little cold. That was an understatement. It felt like I had been touched by a huge block of ice. My back jerked away from her touch, but she didn't remove her hand. With the cold that rushed through me, I also felt the pain easing up. She continued chanting, and my entire body began to feel numb from the cold. Old pains that I barely noticed began to fade away, and I realized she was healing more than the surface wounds. Was she ordered to, or was it her healer instincts kicking in? That's all I can manage for today. She moved back, brushing her dark brown hair off her face, breathing heavily. She sat down as I rolled my shoulders and neck. I felt much better as I slipped my top back on. The pain was gone, and I felt so much lighter generally. There's a lot of internal injuries. I haven't been able to do much, but I will request the High Elder to allow me to heal you daily on a schedule. I don't think that will be necessary, nor will they allow it. I replied, standing up. She smiled and shook her head confidently. Of course, they will allow it. You are special, she murmured. I wasn't sure where she got her information from, but she was far from the truth. I simply thanked her and excused myself. One thing I knew about this family was they would use any excuse to punish me. I needed to complete the cooking. Once I was done, I headed to my room and placed the box on my bed, wondering how Rayan's day had been. Had he managed to find anything? The moment I opened the box, all my attention was focused on the contents. Inside was a stunning black dress, with accessories, shoes, some crystals, and a letter. I picked up the piece of paper and unfolded it, feeling uneasy. I understand that perhaps yesterday I was a little uncalled for. This is my apology to you, and I hope that from here on, we can put the past behind us and face the future as allies. We have been rather eye-blinded by all the hearsay and rumors. Although mistakes were made, to err is human. I will see you tonight. Do forgive me, Eldridge. I placed it down slowly, picking up two of the crystals, a ruby and a carnelian. Strangely, these stones were used for passion and love. Why would she send these? It wasn't unusual for witches to send crystals or rocks along with gifts. I had packed many boxes for Elena to give to others when I was younger. Wouldn't crystals used for new beginnings have been better? Such as peacock or green calcite. Oh, something was up, and I didn't like this, not one bit. 30 minutes later, I was dressed in the shimmery fitted black dress that fell to mid-thigh. It had a high neck, and the arms were sheer. There was a small slit on the left side. There were no tights and my legs felt bare, showing off the few scars that littered them too. I didn't touch the jewelry. If I had a choice, I wouldn't have even touched the dress. Putting on the black heels, I repacked the rest of the items into the box. There had been some makeup, fragrance, jewelry, creams, and hair accessories. But I didn't want to take more from these people when all I wanted was to be far away from them. Well, here goes nothing. Rayan for most of the morning, I found nothing of importance, but I could feel the magic was strong around the Coven's castle. Dulsanra had warned me that I might not be able to venture inside, and she had been correct. So, I had stayed outside. I couldn't risk someone finding me, and there didn't seem to be any way in without walking through a spell that might detect me. Just when I thought I'd go see if I could find anything elsewhere, I walked around the side of the castle and the sound of hushed whispering coming from the other side of the huge wall reached my ears. I guess witches were careful, but they didn't have the same hearing we did. Reginald, we need to be careful. I know what I'm doing. You just do your part. Besides, Samson might be furious when he learns this. You will need to appease Elena and Amaria. We will need them too. He muttered. Will it work? Oh, absolutely, every item is embedded within the spell. She won't be able to resist him. The woman sounded irritated at her own words. I just wish it wasn't my son who was going to be put through this. He is my son too, and he needs to be of some use. Reginald spat. What were they going on about? Dawson is there as well. It might have an adverse spell, but it has to be Cheney. I need a reason for her to be brought into our home. Reginald continued. Oh, the spell will work. It probably will affect you too, but it will be Cheney who will get to her. I will make sure of that. I have put some correct measures in place. I have a plan, Reginald, just trust in me. The woman said coldly. I hope this is worth it. It will be, once she is under the spell completely, she will be ours, body and mind. I have worked far too hard to have things ruined. Reginald chuckled. Don't try to take credit for my work, remember that without me, you are nothing. The woman remarked before I heard retreating footsteps as they began moving further away. Don't get too ahead of yourself, dear. Reginald's voice came, but the amount of poison that dripped from it was far more chilling than anything I had heard before. The woman just scoffed faintly, unfazed by his words. Her true form is far more dangerous to men than any spell I could place. If we are to use her, we need to keep her hidden. She will draw men to her like moths to a flame. She should never have been born, but since she has, let's make use of her. I needed to get back to Dulsanra as soon as possible. They didn't need to say a name for me to know who they meant. I had to make sure she was safe. I made my way through the trees, heading back towards the mansion Dulsanra was residing in. The smell of a witch approaching and 2 pairs of footsteps hit me. I quickly stilled, pressing myself against a tree despite being hidden by Rayhana's spell. Search the area. Someone snapped. Were they on to something? It could have been an animal, Estella. Oh, just do your job. If the council thinks there's a trespasser, there could be, don't forget what the ladies said. There was an alpha wolf with her who looked to be more than just a passerby to the runaway. That was an assumption. You heard Amaria, there's no chance anyone would want her, especially one of the mutts. The man's voice came. Still, we can't take chances. With the plans that are in the works, we need to be extra careful. Estella, the woman murmured. Wait. I turned around, about to slip away when I stopped. Both the man and woman stood there, looking directly at me. Oh. Did the spell wear off? Didn't it would last for at least Rayhana say 24 hours. She was a new witch, After all, maybe she had been wrong. What do we have here? Did you really think that you could get by unnoticed? The man said as the woman began chanting, her hair floating around her. With witches, the best thing was to go straight in for the kill. In a flash, I was in front of the woman. You won't escape. She managed to whisper confidently. Her spell was completed, and I felt the magic around me. Before the man even had a chance to raise his sword, my claws were out as I ripped her heart from her chest. The confident smile on her face was frozen in place as I destroyed her heart with one hand. She didn't even have a moment to comprehend that she was dead. Her body hit the ground just as the man swung his sword at me. I ducked, knocking his legs out from under him, kicking the sword from his hand and plunging my hand into his chest, tearing his heart out. Everything happened in a matter of seconds. I stepped back from the bodies. I had just killed 2 people who may have been innocent. I dragged the bodies under the nearest bushes, a sliver of guilt flitting through me. I took the sword and anything else that looked useful from them. Either way, this wouldn't have happened if Dulsanra hadn't been brought here against her will. I didn't have time to question my actions. I had to get to Dulsanra and get her out of here. Suddenly, the view before me changed, and I paused. The path that led back toward the mansion was gone. Everywhere I looked, everything looked the same. What spell did the witch cast before I killed her? I closed my eyes, trying to focus on all the scents around me. Earth, soil, the leaves, blood, sweat, the air, the promise of upcoming rain, and then the very faint sliver of Dulsanra's scent. This was going to take me time. But I'd get there. All I needed to do was follow her faint scent. I just had to be careful that no one found me before then. Dulsanra, it was extremely hot, and I was beginning to feel lightheaded. I don't know what was wrong with me, everything felt a bit free. Like I had just drunk 10 bottles of beer. I was on a high as I sat here, not wanting to even be a part of this so-called dinner. Cheney was seated opposite to me at the dining table. Although it was a meal that I had prepared and I was hungry, I hated everyone here, save Ames. Not to mention, Dawson's eyes were fixed on me without even care that we weren't alone here. I was sitting next to Ames, but I truly didn't fit at this table. Even though I didn't hate him, he was a stranger to me now. He wouldn't meet my gaze and treated me like I had committed a major crime. I guess I could try to talk to him, but there wasn't much that I could do when he had been brainwashed for years. So Cheney, do you want to share the reason for tonight's visit? Amaria said, pressing herself as she looked at the man next to her. He frowned, looking a little confused. There wasn't really any specific reason. Mother and Father simply thought it would be nice to visit, especially since Dulsanra's back home. He looked at me, giving me a small smile. I frowned, as our eyes met. Why was he even looking at me? And why wasn't Rayan back? He had said he'd be back before dark. Was he okay? The thought of him sent a burning sensation through me, and I pressed my thighs together. Just the thought of him was making me feel all giddy. What was wrong with me? Oh, I'm sure Dulsanra isn't the reason, Cheney. Amaria snipped. Her anger was only growing, but right now the fabric of this dress was getting to me more than her irritating voice. I tugged at the collar. Ugh, what was the matter with me? Everyone else seemed fine. I hadn't even drunk anything alcoholic, despite the table containing 3 different bottles. If the food was spelled, I would have sensed it. "Excuse me, I need to step outside," I murmured, standing up. "Dulsanra. Sit," Samson commanded coldly. I looked at him, feeling irritated. "I will return," I replied through gritted teeth. "I'll join you," Dawson added quickly. "Dawson," Elena said, suspiciously. "Oh Cheney, step outside with Dulsanra," Eldridge stated. "Sure mother." "Cheney?" Amaria stood up quickly alongside Cheney. "I'll be fine alone," I interjected firmly. Why was I so hot? I ran my hands through my hair as I walked to the door, not caring who followed and who didn't. Right now I needed the cold. "Sit down, Amaria, we have much to 41 discuss with your acceptance ceremony," I heard Eldridge say. Acceptance? Which meant one day Amaria would become a high witch. I wish they did a check on a person's personality and background before placing them in such high power. Someone as evil as Amaria, a high witch? I walked to the kitchen heading for the back door. What was wrong with me? I wasn't in pain, so it couldn't be poison. I pushed open the door, relief flooding me when I felt the blistering cold hit me like a wave of relief the moment I stepped outside. But it did little for the fire that was burning through me. Rayan. The image of him shirtless schemed through my head, and the urge to find him consumed me. Remembering our kiss, my burning core throbbed with a need. Wait, was I Dulsanra? Cheney's voice came. He grabbed my waist as I almost stumbled when he called me. "Careful there." "I'm fine," I said, pushing his hands off of me. I belonged to Rayan. Yes, he was the only one who could touch me. Where was he? The daze that was settling over me was filling my head with alarm bells. Something was wrong with me. "Go away, please," I murmured. "Let's go for a walk. You'll feel better," came his reply. I turned to look at him. His face was slightly hazy, his black hair, his dark eyes. If you partially close your eyes, you'd think it was Rayan. "No, go inside," I said, trying to tug free, only for him to pull me against him. "You've grown to become rather beautiful. You're anything but darkness tonight," he whispered. I frowned, pushing at his chest. "Okay, whatever, now let go of me," I murmured. "What's the rush, sweetheart?" His hands ran down my waist, and despite the heat in my body, the chilling reminder that I didn't want him touching me came to the forefront of my mind. I said to let go. I shouted weakly, struggling in his hold. It did nothing but make something hard press against my stomach, making me feel sick. "Keep struggling. You're only making me hotter, sweetheart." I felt a flare of my power rage within me, and for a moment, the fog in my mind cleared a little. I shoved him back with all my might, but he didn't budge. He looked confused. His eyes were hooded and the look in them. I have seen it before far too many times. It was the same look I saw in Horace's, Dawson's, and in the eyes of the leader of those werewolves. The last one made me shiver in disgust. "Cheney, let go of me." I spoke with all the strength I could muster, but my voice sounded weak. Dulsanra, this is home for you now. You know, my family wants me to settle down soon. I thought it was with Amaria until now, but after seeing you, I realized I was wrong. His voice was low and it made me shiver in disgust. My back hit something hard behind me as I tried to move away from him. Back off, Cheney. I struggled against him, feeling suffocated, the fear settling in once again. Stop struggling, Dulsanra. His words were raspy as he crushed his entire body against me. My heart was thundering as I tried to pull free. Let go. Please. I gasped when he grabbed my jaw. His lips crashed against mine and I froze in horror. His other hand roughly pulled up my dress as his filthy hands groped me. No. 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 Pure fear bled into me and my head pounded. This wasn't the first time I was in this position. I was weak, but I was still strong enough to protect myself. His hungry kisses repulsed me. He had drawn blood from my lips as I refused to give him the access he wanted. I channeled all the fury that I felt inside and opened my eyes, ripping my face from his grip. The taste of blood filled my mouth as I chanted a spell, using all the strength I could muster. A spell of destruction. My powers flared around me, the pain in my chest knocking the air from me as I tore at my sealed powers. I didn't care for the consequences as Cheney went flying into the air before he was thrown to the ground brutally. Blood splattered the floor and I fell to my knees coughing. The agonizing pull on my heart hurt horrifically. I felt weak and tired, but I was free from him. I needed to get out of here. Rayan would find me via my scent, right? I used the tree next to me for support as I tried to pinpoint where I was. The woods. When did we get so far out? My mind was blurry, and I felt like my legs would give way at any moment. I wiped my lips, wanting to remove his disgusting touch. I pulled my skirt down, kicking off my heels as I tumbled forward, grabbing onto a tree branch as I kept my balance. Rayan! I whispered. I still felt weak and hot. I knew those crystals that were in the box had something to do with this. But how did it affect me? Were these clothes spelled? I hadn't even sensed magic upon them. Perhaps a strong spell that was masked. I was getting deeper into the forest, but the haze that hung above me clouded all sense of direction. Just when I was considering taking a break, I heard a branch snap. Rayan? I whispered. Where were you? You said UT wouldn't leave me. Who's Rayan? A cold voice that I really didn't want to hear came. Please not now. I didn't have the energy to run. Seems like you did quite a number on Cheney. Well, good, because you belong to me. I turned, my heart thudding as I looked at Dawson. His shirt was ruffled and he was breathing hard, which meant he had been running. You don't need to worry, they all think you're with Cheney, and Amaria's having a screaming match, so no one will know. With each word he spoke, he advanced closer. Back off, Dawson, or I won't hesitate to do the same thing I did to Cheney. I hissed. I wouldn't be able to. My breath was coming out ragged and I had no energy left, I just hoped he didn't realize that. He scoffed as he opened the buckle of his belt. I retreated, my stomach knotting in fear. You only knocked the fool out. It was I who finished the job. He sneered as he grabbed me by my arm and threw me to the ground. Now let's get this over and done with. Don't think you can just parade around in a tiny little dress and think you can walk away as you wish. I crawled backward. Rayan. He lunged at me, slamming me back onto the rough ground of the forest, straddling me as he tore my dress from my shoulders. Stop it! I screamed, despite my voice trembling. I've waited far too long. He murmured, biting into my neck as he kissed me along my neck and shoulders whilst I struggled. Stop! I cried, clawing at his chest, trying to go for his face, but he wasn't bothered, his hands grabbing me painfully tight. My cries and attempts were futile. A low, menacing growl filled the dark woods, the rage in it clear. Before either of us could find the source, Dawson was ripped off me. I heard a sickening crunch as he hit a tree before his body crumbled to the ground. She said stop. The voice was menacing and dangerous, yet it filled me with relief. Rayan. I whispered, my heart leaping, relief flooding me. I got you, kitten. No one's going to touch you ever again. His soft reply came, dropping to his knees and scooping me into his arms. The warm tingles from his touch were welcoming, and I felt my body react to him. I clung to his shirt, curling into him, the fear of what could have happened swirling around me. Despite his calm, comforting exterior, his heart was racing, and I knew he had been worried. Worried about me? I closed my eyes, feeling the tears I didn't know I had started streaming down my cheeks. You're safe, kitten. I was safe, safe in his arms. This was my home, my safe place. Please don't leave me. His hand moved the back of my head tenderly as he gently tugged my head upwards. He shook his head, his black locks curtaining his face. The emotions in those blazing green eyes of his spoke louder than words ever could. I'm never leaving you, kitten. You're my everything, and I swear, each and every person who has hurt you, will not be in any state to meet even the god of death himself when I'm done with them. His words were cold, the hot white anger that was radiating off of him was only growing with each word that left his plush lips. I had never felt this amount of power from him before. He pressed his lips against my forehead gently before placing me on the ground. His eyes returned to normal for a second. I close your eyes. I knew he didn't want me to see what he was about to do. I heard Dawson groan as he tried to get up a short way away. I wouldn't look away. This was the man I had fallen for, the one that could never terrify me. Even when he repeated his command, I kept my eyes open. I wasn't afraid of him, I wasn't ashamed of him. I was proud of who he was. He was meant for me. His animal side, along with his human side. He was mine. My light, my love, my reason to smile, my reason to hope, and above all, he was my alpha. Rayan. I turned away from her, commanding her to close her eyes, but she refused. I could feel her eyes burning into me, but I couldn't hide my anger. This scum had tried to rape her. The scene I had run into, her screaming for him to stop as she tried to push him away. The way he was undoing his pants with one of his hands, the other on her body. The anger I felt was like a blazing fire, and I was the oil, only fueling it further. Back off, mutt! The man growled. Call me what you want, but I am death. I whispered, grabbing him by his neck. I slammed him into the tree behind him. You messed with the wrong alpha. He scoffed, struggling in my hold. You're not the Leakin. I don't fear you. He spat. I smiled coldly. Oh no. I'm not. I extracted my claws slowly, watching them painstakingly penetrate his neck. His shrieks filled the air and I smiled coldly. The thing is, I'm not a king with an entire race to consider. For me, my mate is all that matters. Push me too far and you have before you a psychotic alpha. My voice was soft and low, like a chilling whisper in the wind. I could smell the growing fear in his eyes as he stared directly into my eyes. You deserve so much more than an easy death, but I don't have as much time as I'd like. I whispered, punching him in the stomach with my other hand, before bringing my knee up and crushing his dick and balls, with enough force that I felt his pelvic bones break under the force. He couldn't even breathe. The pain was too much for him to even voice. These were the hands that touched my mate without her consent, right? I grabbed his hand, crushing every bone in it before snapping his wrist brutally, then doing the same to the other, not caring for the screams that filled the air. My anger was beyond my control, and I wouldn't forgive him. These eyes preyed on her, right? Please stop. I beg. He choked, my claws still sunk into his neck. Why didn't you stop when she asked you to? His shrieks filled the air as I ripped one eye out, then the next. His gaping sockets only satisfied me. Now what next? Ah yes, this brain of yours was filled with vile thoughts about her, right? Stop. He was barely coherent, and I knew he wouldn't last much longer. I ripped my hand from his neck, blood squirting everywhere. Soon. I growled murderously. I slammed his head against the wall, repeatedly. The sickening crunches of his skull shattering was like music to my ears. No one touches my mate and lives. No one. She had suffered for far too long, and I would be the one to pass judgment on all of them. I didn't realize when he stopped choking, or when his heart stopped beating. My only thought was the pain he had caused my mate. Rayan. He's dead. Her soft voice made me still, my heart thudding as I stared at the body I was hammering against the wall. She saw all that. But this was who I was. It has always been who I was. Deep beneath the calm exterior, there was a darkness within me that birthed vengeance. I didn't regret it. This was the fate that anyone who had ever hurt her would face. I dropped him to the floor as her slender arms wrapped around me from behind and I closed my eyes, the sparks and warmth from her touch calming the rage within. I looked down at the body that was no longer recognizable. When had the head come off? My hands were dirty, and her heart was beating wildly. I wiped my hands on my chest before I gently pried her arms away and turned to face her, cupping her face. I was scared to see the fear in her eyes. She looked up at me, and I noticed her heavy breathing, her flushed cheeks, but there was no fear in her gorgeous blue orbs. Did he? I swallowed hard as anger boiling as I looked at the hickeys that littered her skin. I looked back into her eyes, and she shook her head. They didn't manage to go far. She whispered. They? I need to take this dress off. It's got some sort of magic done to it. Eldridge planned, her eyes filled with anger and pain, as she began tearing the remaining fabric off. I frowned, moving back and taking my jacket off. I slipped it around her slender shoulders without looking down at her. I would only look at her when she wanted me to. This was her body, no one else's, and not mine until she gave me that right. She looked up at me, her eyes glistening with tears. My gaze dipped to her lips. The bastard had kissed her. My anger only continued to rise. I reached out, gently brushing her lip, before leaning in and kissing her deeply. She whimpered against my lips, as she kissed me back, a small sob breaking her down, her hands trembling as she clung to my shirt. I pulled her into my arms, wishing I could shield her from everything she had to face. "I'm sorry." I tried to stop him. I managed to throw him off, and then Dawson showed up and I had nothing left. What? My stomach sank as I realized there was indeed another scent on her apart from the bastard I had killed minutes earlier. She looked up at me, and for the first time since I had met her, she looked utterly vulnerable. "Do I repulse you?" she whispered. My chest tightened and I shook my head. "Never. I'm just sorry I came later than I should have. I love you, Dulsanra, and that will never ever change." Her heart thudded as my words seemed to register. I didn't mask my emotions because no words could express how I felt about her. A faint smile graced that gorgeous face of hers. Goddess, she was beautiful. "I want to leave," she whispered. "I think we need to. I ended up killing 2 people as well. I've hidden the bag with the grimoire not far from here. We can grab it and leave right now." "Do you think they'll come after you?" I asked. "No." She was cut off when suddenly the entire sky was illuminated with flashes of thunder. "Rayan, you can hide yourself. Run." She pushed me away from herself, but I shook my head. Gripping her arm, I pulled her behind me. "We are one, Dulsanra, we're not parting again." My words were absolute, even when the 7 witches and 3 men appeared before us. I held my ground. My eyes blazing green, I unleashed all of my alpha aura. I was Rayan Rossi, and I wasn't scared of the Lichen King himself, so why did these witches think I'd run from them? I recognized 2 of the women from that night, the ones that accompanied her sister. The others I had never seen before, but they were strong. "I came for my mate. Let us pass and no one gets hurt," I said coldly. For now, they needed to pay for every crime they had committed, and I wasn't going to let that slide. "Mate?" an elder man asked curiously. "Dulsanra is my mate, and I am not handing her over. You killed 2 of our people earlier, and now another. Do you think you can just walk away?" One of the women spat coldly, her eyes filled with hatred. "You're looking at the nephew of the Lichen King himself. He knows where I am. Kill me and you're asking for all-out war. The choice is yours." My words resonated in the area, my wolf's voice overlaying my own as I held their gaze. Not missing the power that emanated from the middle witch. I didn't blink and she hesitated. I know my words had left an impact, and as much as I was not going to rely on Uncle, no harm in using his name to make a statement. "The woman behind you is a witch, do you know that?" the man who had spoken before asked. "And?" I was aware of Dulsanra's tight grip on my shirt, the way her heart was hammering in her chest. I hated seeing her in this state. You are going to accept a witch as your mate? He asked. Yes. Well, she is what is going on here? A man thundered as he and a woman joined the rest. Seize them! That voice, it only took me a second to realize it was the same man, Reginald, who I had heard earlier. Anyone touches my mate, and I'll, the woman screamed as she pointed at the body on the floor not far from us. That's... Oh my! Is that Cheney? The woman was the same one from earlier too. No, it's Dawson. One of the men who had rushed to the body said in a hushed voice. He's a monster. Look what he's done. I could hear him, but I didn't care. That scum got what was coming to him. He tried to rape Dulsanra. I only wish I punished him a lot more before I sent him off. I growled murderously. You can read my mind, you will see exactly what happened. Dulsanra spoke, her voice was shaky, but her eyes held a look of defiance in them as she stood next to me. I wrapped my arm around her possessively. The two that had just arrived exchanged looks, and their conversation from earlier returned to me with full force. I think that might be a good idea. I also heard a rather interesting conversation earlier. I said, my eyes fixed on the couple. The middle witch stepped forward. What is going on? She asked, looking at Reginald suspiciously. I have no idea, don't believe their kind. If he wants Dulsanra, then take her and go. Reginald said icily. You have done enough damage here. High Elder. How can you allow them to leave? Even if Dawson may have been in the wrong, what about the patrol earlier? You said Dulsanra was needed, the witch in the middle exclaimed. Enough. Yes, it was important, but right now the safety of our people is far more important, Magdalene. Do you have something to hide? Dulsanra asked quietly. His eyes flashed as he glared at her. He sure did have a lot to hide. You have until the count of 5 to leave, otherwise we will hold you for the murders of those you have killed. Reginald hissed. We were only trying to help you, but it seems you don't want to live a life amongst us, to learn to control your powers or to be one of us. So go with the Alpha. Let's just hope he doesn't cast you aside like they usually do. It's okay, I'm used to being cast aside, but I know that he won't. Her voice was low, but the moment she ended her sentence, my emotions surged, and I couldn't resist the small smile that crossed my lips. The truth will never stay hidden forever, I said quietly. If anyone tries to come after her again, I swear they will turn out worse than him. I jerked my head towards the body on the ground. I could tell Reginald held more power than the rest, and he was in the but right now, no one was going to wrong. Listen to us. If we angered them, they'd try to shut our voice down. This was not over because I was not going to let anyone get away with the shit they put her through, but now was not the time. I took Dulsanra's hand and backed away slowly. From the look in Reginald's eyes, I knew he too didn't think this was over. Two species that hated each other from the bottom of their hearts. Yeah, this was far from over, but right now. Me walking away was the best thing for us and for him. Our eyes met, the challenge clear in them. Even as I created space between us, I knew he was only letting me out of here because he was scared of being ousted. But I also knew that more than half of the witches here would side with him. I couldn't risk Dulsanra. Not right now, but I will surely prove her innocence and I will return to make all those who made her suffer, pay. One thing about me, I never forgot anything and I didn't let anything slide. Dulsanra murmured. Let's go. I nodded. Yeah, this was not over. Until things were settled, she would never feel safe. I turned away, scooping her up into my arms. Until next time. Join our Facebook and WhatsApp group for more updates, link is given in description. Rest audiobook will be continued in next episode.